Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining today's webinar on the future of work and freelancing. To start off, a brief introduction about myself. I'm Marlon Litz-Rosenzweig. I'm the CEO and co-founder of WorkGenius. I founded the company now back in 2012 in Germany. And in 2017, we decided to expand to the US and open an office here in New York. This will be our first webinar. So I'm excited to share some great insights and engage with you all. I'm also joined here by my colleague, Sabba.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sabba, VP of Sales here at WorkGenius. So I lead our sales initiatives and operations in the US. Most recently, I was with a company of similar background, Andela, which is a globally distributed workforce solution that finds the best engineering talent in Africa and places them with companies across the globe. I bring over 15 years of experience in the technology SaaS space, specifically working in the talent optimization and alternative workforce sectors. Really excited to be here today.
Thanks, Sabba. Thanks for joining. Some housekeeping rules to mention. We'll have time in the end for Q&A, and we'll do our best to answer all of your questions. We have Ornella here behind the scenes. She's on our marketing team, and she will be moderating your questions today. Thanks, Ornella, for that. We're going to start off with a poll. So we ask you, have you used freelancers before? Yes or no? Please answer now. Let's give it a few seconds. Perfect. Okay, great. So the majority said yes, 73%. That's great. That's normally what we see across most companies nowadays. So we'll be covering some strategies here that will be incredibly useful to both manage and expand the impact of freelancing on your organization. Let's look at the agenda for today. We will start out with a high-level overview of the current state of the US workforce. Then we will sort of talk about the new world of employment that we're entering, and also specifically freelancing, which is sort of the biggest trend there. We'll have an introduction to WorkGenius, which will be led by Sabba, and also how WorkGenius integrates with companies, and then best practices to working with distributed teams. And at the end, as sort of mentioned before, we'll talk about your questions. So just feel free to submit them as we go along. Perfect. This chart shows the unemployment in the United States, which is at a historical low at 3.7%, which sounds great at first. But as you peel back the layers, you find that there are actually more open positions in the United States than there are people unemployed. What that means, if we were to fill all positions with all unemployed people, we would still have unfilled positions. And what that translates into is that the US loses out on $160 billion in GDP every year. Huge number. What we also see is that the cost of hiring is getting more and more expensive, and the time it takes to fill a position now is 52 days, and it costs about $4,000 to fill that position. 91% of managers across companies report that they're struggling with hiring employees right now. So the low unemployment is great, but companies really do struggle because of that. Then what you need to factor in is the talent pool that we're currently hiring from. So in 2020, 50% of the workforce will be made up of millennials. And then by 2030, we'll have 75% of the workforce being millennials. And millennials sort of carry a different set of expectations than previous generations. And if they aren't properly met, this will sort of lead to challenges for companies. What the millennial generation wants most is flexibility. They value experiences and want to find meaning and purpose in the workplace. And the fair but the ugly truth is that companies aren't meeting these expectations right now. And why is this, even more critical than it seems already, is when you look at the average tenure of a millennial in the workplace, which is 16 months with a given company. So remember, 91% of managers struggle to hire people. They spend on average $4,000 and wait 52 days to find someone. And then that person only stays for 16 months. So it takes you 2 months to fill the position, and then 16 months later, you lose that person already. And this is why freelancing is so interesting. And sort of, we jump to the next slide here. It's one of the most exciting and talked about components of the alternative and contingent workforce these days. In the past decade alone, we have gathered incredible data on powering and leveraging this talent pool, which is on demand and highly specialized for business needs. And believe it or not, it's not a new thing per se and an outsider thing. It is really the norm. So what we see is that the freelance population growth outpaces the FTE population growth by 300%. And by 2027, we see that the US workforce is expected to be made up by 50% of freelancers. So it's not just a trend, it's generally becoming the new norm. On top of that, when you read through numerous reports, they are pointing to freelancers or gig workers and contractors to be the key to a lot of the remaining gaps for organizational success. Deloitte, for instance, reports that 72% have improved their organizational success just by tapping into the freelance talent pool, as opposed to the traditional FTE pool exclusively. And by doing that, they're able to capture highly specialized talent whenever and wherever they need it most. And this is not just a phenomenon for small companies. Google, for instance, has employed more contingent workers than FTEs for the first time in 20 years. And what we learn from that example, anybody who's followed the news around this topic has seen that sort of, there's a bit of a discussion around how Google treated those contingent workers. So one of the biggest lessons that we learned from this was that hiring freelancers is only half of the problem. The other half is managing and keeping them happy. And that is sort of the biggest challenge that companies face these days. And when you look at how prepared companies are, Deloitte reports that only 8% of organizations have established processes to manage freelancers. And that's because sourcing and managing freelancers is a time suck and a huge inefficiencies for teams. And if you're wondering sort of where these inefficiencies coming from, it's basically no one wants to go through hundreds of proposals, negotiate different rates, and communicate with freelancers across several different platforms, especially when bearing in mind that the average freelance engagement is even shorter than the millennial tenure of 16 months. So freelancer engagement could be anything from a week to a couple of months. So if you sort of factor in that, then the cost of getting these people in and managing them it's so costly, it doesn't make any sense anymore to make that viable. And that's where AI becomes the hero, because AI can help with a lot of the issues that we just described. It has the ability to streamline HR processes much more efficiently by automating certain repetitive tasks and making smart hiring decisions from skill-based data. Skill-based data is much more valuable to look at when hiring a freelancer than personality traits. You will sort of not interact with a freelancer as much as you will with a colleague that sits next to you. Hence, sort of the personality traits are not as important. You don't need to click with a freelancer necessarily as much as you need to click with someone that you would hire who sits next to you. And sort of, this was sort of the state of the future of work and sort of what we are currently trending towards. And Sabba is taking over from here and sort of, talking a bit about Work Genius and how we integrate into companies.
Excellent.
All yours, Sabba.
Thank you, Marlon. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So seriously, that's why Work Genius exists. In order to provide a genuinely efficient freelance solution, we had to do away with our human inefficiencies. So leveraging different AI technologies, we created a platform that provides businesses with specialized on-demand freelancers and an intuitive platform to manage both your talent and projects seamlessly. So let's talk about how that works. Our platform is either accessed directly or through the guidance of our Work Genius project managers. At the beginning of all engagements, we make sure to understand your business needs and projects to determine the best course of action. Then the technology takes care of the rest. The platform allows you to easily create postings for specific deliverables using our job wizard. Then the AI technology automatically matches your job with qualified freelancers. This process accounts for any granular requisites and skill set, background knowledge, and successful completion of similar jobs in the past. Once the freelancers submit their results, the results are verified and batched into deliverables. And then just as easily, the work is delivered in your desired format, within your deadline, and to your specifications. And from there, revisions can always be requested to ensure the deliverables meet your project's objective. So this feedback loop has proven incredibly useful to our platform as our freelancers adapt quickly and help improve results for all clients moving forward. This is great. In fact, last quarter, all freelancers' first project submissions were accepted with 4- and 5-star ratings from our clients. So let's talk about the workflow here. Our product features are specifically designed to streamline your workflow with freelancers from start to finish. Our AI-enabled platform uses NLP, which is natural language processing, to detect the skills needed for your project and matches it to the most qualified freelancers. Whereas most of you may have experienced this, freelance management platforms out there require you to go through dozens of negotiations to source your freelancers. Built-in verification loops ensure high-quality results so you're not spending hours of manual work going through revisions and edits. You can then maintain a fully transparent workflow to track the jobs being completed for you. Think of the management interface as Gmail, Asana, and Slack all in one. It's pretty powerful. Now, being able to instantly match and scale anywhere from 1 to 1,000 specialized freelancers within 28 minutes means you have the resources available to instantly cut your deadlines in half and manage a huge team without having to do the heavy lifting. Let that soak in for a second. Lastly, our fully handled payment systems means you're never going to stress issuing 1099s again. On top of that, our compliance frameworks within a secure VPN means you never have to worry about your data being compromised. All right, so that was a lot of information. Let's break down what each feature means for your business. So using AI means that you can immediately tap into this vetted talent network. All of our freelancers are evaluated in an assessment center long before they're allowed to take on any projects. On top of that, we actually continue to assess our freelancer skills as they work on projects, so clients are assured that they're working with the most qualified talent. That data has given us access to 350,000 vetted, college-educated professionals based in the US and Western Europe. So going into the quality of job results. Our freelancers go through multiple layers of verification checks to make sure you're consistently receiving the high-quality results. We start with the job briefing itself, and as stated before, NLP is actively detecting these skills required from our client project briefs and intelligently matching it to the best talent by skill set and knowledge base. Once that project is submitted, our freelance verification comes into play. Multiple job results can be analyzed and modified for consistency by the senior freelancers on our platform. Our clients are notified about the job results being ready to accept. Although we do see relatively minimal revision requests, we allow for unlimited revisions to make sure that our clients can account for anything specified in the briefing. Excuse me. So this is very important. You're only paying for results once you choose to accept the freelancer submissions. So something that's extremely unique by WorkGenius and what you're not seeing out there in the market these days. The way we're constantly improving our talent pool at the end of the process is through our Genius ratings. Positive ratings give freelancers the opportunity to seek higher paying jobs and immediately informs them of areas of self-improvement. Negative performance past a certain threshold will prevent these freelancers from using our platform. This feedback is vital to continue strengthening the talent pool. So Marlon mentioned this a few minutes ago. Hiring freelancers is really only half of the heavy lifting. What really makes WorkGenius unique is that we are with you throughout the successful completion of your job. So delivering results in record speed and scale is something that we're going to focus on. Remembering how long it took to hire someone full-time, we knew the speed and scale were two important facets of freelancing that had to be addressed. Our infrastructure instantly adapts to bigger projects, scopes, and any shortened timelines by building teams of 1 to 1,000 freelancers. You can easily downscale from 1,000 to 10 freelancers overnight as well. It all depends on your individual needs. So this is really cool. For example, one of our clients, Expedia, was matched with 1,000 freelancers in just 28 minutes to start writing 22,000 hotel descriptions, and they ended up saving $479,000 in internal cost while accelerating their project timeline by more than double. It's an incredible story. So I think some of you that have joined today are thinking about going towards the freelance world or an alternative workforce, and you may have some concerns of that. So what we try to do is kind of put that behind you. Through our compliance framework, we'll hopefully remove those remaining doubts. Freelancers on the platform are verified for their identity through a bank-level KYC process. You can seamlessly issue 1099s and send NDAs with the platform. Additionally, your freelancers will work with a secure, cloud-based virtual work environment that keeps our sensitive information entirely safe. And so if that isn't reassuring enough, our free frameworks also automatically adapt to different regulatory environments and country-specific rules. Lastly, paying on WorkGenius is also incredibly easy. Our payment systems are set up that all you need to do is accept your results. The moment that happens, all rights are transferred over to you and your freelancers are paid within 24 hours. All right, so let's summarize here. With WorkGenius, you're given access to instantly scale your team from 1 to 1,000 freelancers based on your project scope and needs. Our AI-enabled matching algorithm then ensures your jobs quickly go to the right freelancer. From there, you're able to stay on top of your projects using our centralized workflow platform to review progress and submissions of multiple jobs. All of this is seamless and is protected by a built-in security payment and compliance frameworks that protects you entirely throughout the process. All right, so let's talk about best practices here. We've touched on the future of work. We've discussed WorkGenius and its benefits. So here's the thing, if you're not using a freelance solution like WorkGenius yet, it's still important to be strategic when managing your freelancers. So let's run through some best practices and what it would look like to manage your freelancers. Number one, hire a project manager. This is something that you may not be thinking about when you are planning your budgets, headcounts, etc. Overseeing work usually depends on both the granular understanding of your organization and the ability to account for the sourcing, fit, and progress of multiple people. So for a lot of companies, this comes in the form of a project manager. Finding the right PM usually entails experience detailing individual project scopes, working with HR to source different freelancers, onboarding talent, managing progress, and issuing freelance payments. So I cannot stress the importance of communication. From day one, empowering your freelancers with a formalized onboarding process to provide them with the tools they need is vital to their success. Depending on the tools you use, all of your communication can be carried out in one platform or multiple. I suggest a project management tool like Asana and a messaging tool to instantly communicate like Slack. The last thing you want to do is to worry about is if your freelancers know how to get in touch with you, or if a lack of information will prevent them from finishing your jobs within a deadline. Here's a tip. Make sure that there's clarity around all aspects of your project to save you the trouble later. All right, so if you don't properly communicate the project scope to your freelancers, you risk the chance of wasting hours on revisions and missing your deadline. That's why it's incredibly important to establish a clear revision process so that your freelancer knows exactly how to organize their time working on this project. Here's an example. Say you have a tight blog deadline. You give the freelancers 3 days to draft their initial copy, 2 days to make your revisions, and 1 day to finalize the entire blog. I highly recommend communicating that before you bring them onto your team and outline consequences if they don't meet that expectation. It's all about level setting from day one. Okay, last but not least, stay up to date with freelance laws and regulations. If you've been on the news lately, especially in the state of California and across the US, you don't want to get into a place where you're running into legal troubles. So there are major bills pushed in Congress right now, and it's a hot topic amongst presidential candidates. More likely than not, these freelancers that you're working with are going to be well-versed and know their laws better than you do. So don't make that mistake of hiring a freelancer without understanding the potential fallout. Most important thing to note is executing a contract between both parties so there's absolutely no miscommunication. As long as you're keeping yourself educated, you ideally won't run into these issues.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Sabba. This was great. Bear in mind that sort of, the last thing, the best practice, we have all of that covered for you. So, just in case. This was sort of the salesy bit of this webinar. Let's now jump into the questions that you have. I'll just read that out to you. So the first one is, how long will it take for freelancers to start working on my projects once I submitted the briefing? So we have an average global matching time of 28 minutes. That means a couple of projects get matched within a second and someone starts working on it, and a couple might take up to 24 hours, but that is sort of, what we have seen across the globe. Second question, where are the freelancers typically located? Are they mainly in the US? Sabba, do you want to answer that?
Yes, so of the 350,000 freelancers on our platform, majority of them are in US and Western Europe. I think it's really critical to emphasize this, as we talk about vetted, professional, highly educated, and these are the areas that we focus on.
Okay, perfect. Next one, what is the education level of your freelancers? I may answer this. So this actually hails back from the fact that when we started the company in 2012, we were still at university. So we were very close to sort of college kids and started out just admitting college freelancers to our platforms. And we have moved away from that, but we still see that more than 90% of our freelancers do have a college education. Next question, what benefits does a project manager bring for companies? Sabba, that was your part.
Yes, so I will caveat by saying that I actually don't think it's a benefit to bring on a project manager, because there are tools out there, there's systems out there that will manage that for you. However, if in the case where you don't have the products in place like WorkGenius, I do think having a project manager managing the freelancers, the digital workforce, or contractors is going to be critical to the success of your business.
Perfect, thanks. Next question. The workload of me and my operations team increased a lot, but my budget got cut and I'm not allowed to hire anymore. Can freelancers or WorkGenius help me here? Very good question. We hear this a lot. One of the things that we have seen when it comes to budgeting is that WorkGenius is considered a service provider. So it doesn't come from any HR budget, but it actually comes from a service budget. So that is something that could help. Another thing that also helps here is that you only pay for results. So you don't pay per hour. So you have 100% cost predictability around these things, and it doesn't you don't need to manage people and make sure that their productivity is high. I hope that answers your question, but Sabba,
yeah, I'll actually add to that. You also want to think about time to hire, right? So the amount of time it takes to source, interview, and find that full-time hire, obviously time spent, money spent, and then of course on top of the salaries that you're paying, the admin, the health and benefits, and all of that included is probably some of the reasons why budgets have been cut on your end. So I would think about that as well when you're talking about a freelance solution or a distributed workforce.
Perfect. Next question. As an e-commerce manager here at Hewlett-Packard, I manage many projects with a team of 10 people. Large teams, that's what we see a lot. My superiors recommend using freelancers, but I'm not really used to hiring freelancers. What are the advantages of freelancers for companies? Sabba, that's absolutely for you.
So I think we alluded to this a couple times. Number one, as Marlon just alluded to this, is that you only pay for the results. And that's really, really powerful. Number two, you're able to scale up and down as quickly as needed based on your deliverables and projects. And I imagine at HP, working with the several clients that you have, that the workflows just adjust accordingly. So back to the time of hire, when you're spending 4 weeks to find someone on a 6-month project, it just doesn't make sense, right? With a freelancer, you find them, scale them immediately, and you put them on that project. So that's really powerful, and I think that's one of the bigger benefits.
Perfect. Next question. How are the freelancers vetted? I think this actually sort of caters to what you just said, Sabba. We have a skill assessment center. So every freelancer that starts working on the platform has to go through this. And then we also have a vetting process. So you start out working on projects, and then that result gets verified by another freelancer before we give access to larger projects to these freelancers. So we have a double vetting process, if you wish. One, the assessment center at the beginning, and then the result verification through another freelancer. Because what we have seen over the past 6 years is that quality matters more than anything, and then it's speed and overhead. Okay. Then next one. What do you think is the driving trend? What do you think is driving this trend? You showed that millennials prefer to be more flexible than previous generations. That's a tricky one. I can only speculate around this, even though we have a lot of millennials in the office, but we should poll them. But one of the things that we have seen is if you're striving for meaningful work and purpose at the workplace, it's very hard for companies to sustain that over long periods of time. So that reduces sort of the tenure, and we feel that sort of the trend towards instant gratification doesn't really help, which is why people have sort of shorter concentration spans, and they seek purpose and meaning. And if that is not delivered immediately, people need the flexibility to sort of jump around, if you wish. That is sort of what we have seen when we sort of did qualitative analysis around this. But we'll definitely address this going forward, and more webinars or even blog posts. Perfect. Next question. How do you respond to critics of freelancing? Oh, that is, I think that I should go with that. That's my favorite one. What we have seen is freelancing is not new. So if you look at doctors or accountants, they are technically freelancers. They have to find their own clients. They engage with them for short periods of time. It is not a continuous engagement necessarily. So it's not new. That is the one thing. The concerns around freelancing are that freelancers don't get the benefits that FTEs necessarily get, which is true, but it's not always true. So if you look at, you can be an FTE and you don't get the benefits that are commonly associated with being an FTE. And we also see that as soon as sort of liquidity goes up in the freelance workspace, there will be enough jobs for freelancers. So there won't be a pressure on prices or any of this, but you will find work almost instantaneously when you go to a platform like WorkGenius, for instance. That is one thing. We feel that regulation around these topics needs to step it up a bit and need to make sort of healthcare insurance more available to freelancers as well. What's interesting sort of from a 10-year perspective also is that the average tenure of 16 months currently, that's almost a freelance engagement. That is sort of, when we talk about this, if someone is an FTE for 16 months, he may as well, or she may as well be a freelancer. So that is sort of how we would respond to critics. But we still get that a lot, but we feel that is sort of, they're toning it down a bit. Okay. How do you vet the qualifications of the freelancers? Do you want to give that a shot, Sabba?
Yeah, so the freelancers are, number one, applying to the program. So we are looking at their background, we're looking at their previous experiences in the workforce. And then from there, they come into the assessment centers. So we're testing them on EQ, IQ models. We're looking at soft skills and hard skills as well. So overall, we're seeing a holistic approach, not just like I've been a graphic designer for 5 years and I should be a senior freelancer. It's more than that. So we really take a holistic approach there.
Thanks. Then in your experience, what type of tasks would you recommend to use freelancers for? Great question. The number one defining factor for a successful freelance project is that you can define it well upfront. And that sort of puts the onus on the person that wants to get the work done with a freelancer. But we have built technology that assists with that. Most of the tasks that we're currently covering are sort of in the creative realm. That could be anything from sort of content, video, graphic design, but also things like research or small programming tasks. Everything that can be defined in a briefing is something that freelancers can do for you. Next question. Do you plan to extend beyond the US and Europe? Short answer, yes, absolutely. We build our AI technology over the course of 6 years, and everybody who's sort of versed with that type of technology knows that you need to work on sort of somewhat of a homogeneous data set to really train these algorithms, which is sort of why we wanted to keep the variance of variables to a minimum as much as possible. But we're definitely planning on expanding outside of the US and Europe. Markets that we're looking at are sort of Asia and Latin America right now, because we feel there is fantastic talent there which does not have the opportunity yet to work on great projects outside of their country, and their skills are not necessarily recognized outside of their country. And we know that we can make that work for them. So that is something that we are actively looking into. Next question. What kind of code of conduct or community guidelines do you have in place to resolve disputes, problems that occur with cooperating with freelancers? Okay, let me answer that as well. One of the things that is very important when you work with someone is to establish ground rules. That equally applies to the traditional workplace as well as working with freelancers. We have all the rules laid out up front. So there are, what Sabba mentioned, revision requests that you can ask if they are out of scope, meaning the initial scope is extended. Then the freelancer can sort of flag that and let the client know, hey, this is not me correcting the initial result, but this is basically me doing extra work that I could not have anticipated. And then we normally don't see any sort of conflicts result from this. But if you have two reasonable parties on both sides, which we normally have, that is not really an issue. Next question. I have my own freelancers that I use very frequently. Is there any way for me to utilize them on your platform? Sabba?
Yes, absolutely. Great question. So as part of our, let's say, product offerings or our platform, you do have the option of bringing your own freelancers into the platform and being able to manage them. And I think that's really powerful, because one of the reasons, and I'll allude this back to one of the questions of, why do freelancers maybe have a bad rap, is because it's not that they're not talented. It's not that, you can't find great people doing great work. It's hard to manage them, and it's hard to get the compliances in place. So bringing your freelancers into WorkGenius and being able to do all the managing, from the 1099s to the payments to the IP transfers, is highly recommended. And I'm happy to talk to you about that further.
Perfect. Thanks, Sabba. Next question. How do you monitor the freelancers? What kind of monitoring and flagging mechanisms do you have in place? Very good question. Again, what Sabba mentioned earlier, everything is result-based, which means that we actually don't need to monitor the freelancer, but there is a project budget agreed upfront. And if that should not suffice to get the work done, we will leverage our data pool of about 5 billion data points and millions of hours of work that we have supplied to companies to see whether the initial project scope is realistic or needs to be extended or reduced. So that way we don't have to monitor everybody. We align the incentives very much. If a freelancer can get something done faster than anticipated, good for them, but they cannot just waste time at home and the client has to pay for it. And hence, we don't need to monitor them. What happens when a freelancer misses a deadline? Next question. So we don't miss deadlines. No, it does happen. This again comes back to the ground rules. We make it very clear if a deadline is missed, that project is automatically reassigned to another freelancer who then works on it. And as a freelancer, you do know that. So you have to give notice up front that you may need more time. But if you just don't get back in time, that work will be reassigned to someone else, and the freelancer that missed the deadline will not get paid, which is a very strong incentive for them to stick to the ground rules. Okay. What kind of assurance do I get as a client prior to the transaction?
Yeah, so I touched on this briefly, but one of the I would say game changers of our platform and WorkGenius is that you have the unlimited revisions within a scope. So that allows you to go back and say, I want to make these changes and these edits, and you do not get billed until you have the final say or final approval. And that's really a big differentiator for us. If I imagine, based on that question, you may have used freelancers before, you're typically going to provide them the job scope. They're going to tell you it's X amount of hours, and you're going to have to pay them up front. And you have to wait for the results. There might be some edits. You may have to pay them some more. So that's the biggest assurance, is that nothing gets billed until you accept the job.
Great, thank you. Next question. How are you guys different from companies like Fiverr and Upwork? We're not public yet. That is first differentiator. When you look at the companies that we cater to, we are a true business solution. So it's less transactional. We actually help companies to augment their workforces and work with the digital workforce and add that to their workforce composition. So that is sort of the strategic difference. When you look at the product, what we do, unlike on these platforms, we find you the perfect freelancer for your project automatically. So you don't have to go through proposals and profiles and find that person. We then seamlessly integrate that into a task and project management tool where you can manage that external workforce of those freelancers seamlessly. And then on top of that, we integrate that workflow tool into a payment framework, which means we can then pay those freelancers compliantly, issue 1099s. So we take care of all of that for you. The aforementioned platforms do not do that. They have more of a manual approach, which we feel is great for sort of one-off projects where you have the time to engage in sourcing the right freelancers, manage them through your own platforms and paying them. But what we have seen from our clients is that they don't have the time nor the resources to do all of that. Okay, next questions. What industries are catered to?
All industries. As long as you have work that needs, or deadlines that need to be met, and projects that are coming up in your pipeline, WorkGenius will be that fit for you. So we focus anywhere from SEO to data mining to content creation and everything in between.
Cool. Next question. How do you make freelancers engage in good work? How do you motivate them? Very good question. I think there's a couple of things that are important to quality assurance. We have 3 pillars that we sort of normally mention here. One is selecting the right freelancer. You need to have the right person for the job, which is pretty much a data play. So you need to look as much data as you can and analyze that in a clever way. So that's number one. We analyze about 5,000 data points per freelancer profile to find the right freelancer, and we only rely on either assessment center data or past job performance on our platform. So that data is never, can never be corrupted or fake. Second part is you need to motivate the person correctly, which is something that we do where you have almost a career ladder on WorkGenius. So if you receive good feedback, you make more and more money over time, which is something that we have seen is very powerful. And we pair that with a gamification component that gives them badges in certain categories, which is also psychologically very powerful. And then the third and last pillar is result verification, which means we have freelancers that check the result before it comes back. The result cannot be submitted to the client before the verifier does not approve of the result, which also again motivates the initial freelancer that works on this to deliver high quality results. Okay, next question. I already handle a contingent workforce at a large retailer in New Jersey. Would it be possible to manage my existing freelancers with WorkGenius too?
Yeah, so that's, first of all, that's awesome that you are, managing a team remotely or distributed. Kudos to you. I alluded to this earlier. You absolutely can manage your freelancers on our platform. Again, happy to talk in detail if you like.
Great. Next question. How do I rate the freelancers to tell the good ones from the troublesome ones? We have a sophisticated rating mechanism where each result gets rated, and that result is associated with a certain skill set that was required to produce that result. So the rating is skill-based, and then based on that going forward, we look at whether that freelancer has the required skills and the required rating on these skills to work on future projects. Okay, there's a lot of questions. What kind of risks should I anticipate as a client? Sabba, do you want to talk to this?
Yeah, I think, so I'll take off my WorkGenius hat for a second. What the risks that you want to think about is, are these jobs, or the projects you have in place, the deadlines that you have for these projects, how important are they, and how are they going to impact your business? And I think that's a big risk, whether it's a freelancer on WorkGenius, whether it's a full-time employee that you hire internally, or what have you. So there's always going to be risk, and that's why we have these verification loops. We have the approvals systems in place, and everything in between. So there's always going to be risk, whether it's freelancer or full-time hire. It's about how important is this project, how is it going to impact your business, and how quickly do you need to get people in place to make it happen.
Perfect. Here's a question for me, I guess. What motivated you to create WorkGenius? Have you done freelance work before? This is kind of an embarrassing story. I was at college. During the summer, I worked in retail, and I was fired from that job. And I had about 3 weeks left of summer vacation and was desperately, trying to make some money to pay for my room at college. And what I ran into was companies saying, Marlon, we would like to hire you, but you only have 3 weeks left of summer vacation. We can't make that work. It takes too long to get you in the door. That's probably going to take 3 weeks. So there's just no point. And this was really where both my co-founder and I started thinking about the future of work and sort of ever decreasing 10 years and shorter project durations for freelancers. And we noticed that companies were not ready yet to engage people for short periods of time. And hence we sort of created Work Genius to address these issues. Okay, and then one last question. What benefits do you have for freelancers? Also a good one. Again, we started out more on the freelance side than the company side when we started the company. One of the things that we have seen is that freelancers invest about 30% of their time just finding the right project and sending proposals and pitching, and that is time that they don't get paid for. So we wanted to automate all of this to reduce the overhead for freelancers. And we're also partnering with networks that can provide healthcare insurance, which is sort of something that we are very passionate about here, because we feel that everybody should have health insurance and get paid for the work that they do. So that is really what we do for freelancers. We also pay them within 24 hours. So there's no long waiting periods to get your money for the work that you have already done. That is it for today. Thank you very much. Those were great questions. I hope all of you took something from this. We will also make sure that we share the deck with you going forward, and we will sort of reply to some of the questions that we will receive after this point in time. And have a great day. Thanks from New York.
Yeah, and then one request from us, please. We'd love to hear some feedback from everyone on this webinar. So Ornella will be sharing a survey in the chat right now, and we will also include a link to it in our follow-up email, along with a recording of this webinar. So you're gonna get everything that we talked about today, but yeah, huge favor, fill out this survey. We always wanna get better. We always wanna have impactful content for our guests. And yeah, thanks again, everyone.
Thank you, goodbye.
Bye.